Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. We'll take a look inside some of the things the guys are hearing from some recent camp practices, including one Jalen Hurts. Of course, Jalen Hurts in year number 4. We've got 3 different versions of Hurts. The first year, we had a pretty average guy. The second year, we had an MVP-level guy. The third year, we had a pretty good guy. What guy are we hearing about in year number 4, Mosher? Are we going to get the average guy, the MVP guy, or the guy that we saw last year? What are we hearing about this Jalen Hurts, Kellen Moore marriage here?
Well, it's a different offense, and you've heard Jalen Hurts talk about comprehending 95% new offense, but he doesn't look so far like someone who's, stuck in a new one, all the intricacies. He's been as far as, Andrew DeCecco's been down there. Adam's been down there. I've checked in on things, and he's been nice, smooth, having a good rhythm with a lot of his receivers. Now, most of the plays that people would call splash plays, they're coming to who you'd expect they'd come to, right? They're going to A.J. Brown. They're going to Devontae Smith, who had a great practice over the weekend, as the Eagles really try to figure out their depth behind those two guys. But what you like to see, Mike, early on is that the ball doesn't hit the ground very often. I think it's particularly impressive that 9 times out of the 10 defense is going to be ahead of the offense for the first 6 to 7 days of camp, and it doesn't appear that that's been the case so far through this camp.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people. I don't know. Are we just assuming that Hurts is going to be better this year, or is this a situation where that Jalen Hurts has to kind of reprove himself?
Yeah, I think any quarterback, not Patrick Mahomes, not Josh Allen, maybe Burrow. I feel like they all have to prove themselves year in and year out that they're trying to be in that conversation. You and I have talked about a guy like Matthew Stafford, right, who won a Super Bowl and then he got hurt, and then he was like in nobody's top 10 going into last year, and then he went out with no expectations and they won 11 games. So, and then all of a sudden he's back up there. So that's kind of how life is for most quarterbacks. But just for this offense with all the weapons around him, and now Saquon Barkley, 2 great wide receivers, an offensive line that they're trying to, keep at an elite level, and him getting back into a new offense, I feel like the pieces are there for him to do well. He just has to be listen, to me, I've talked to some people about this. You don't have to be a superstar, just can't turn the ball over as much as he did last year. He just has to protect the ball better and not bail the pocket at the first sign of pressure. Stay in there, find your weapons. You do that, you expect that he'll be fine.
Do we anticipate seeing more running from Hurts this year? There was a lot of questions about his health last year being a factor there, but nothing really reported after the season was over regarding these injuries that he kind of was dealing with throughout the season. But does Kellen Moore anticipate having more of a mobile running Jalen Hurts, similar to the guy that we saw 2 years ago?
Designed runs, yes. I believe Jalen Hurts has +1 in the run game intentionally, is a very good weapon for the Eagles. It has been in the past. Non-designed runs, or scrambling away from pressure or scrambling away from perceived pressure and not staying on script with the offense, is probably not what the Eagles coaching staff wants to see.
Yeah, you take a look at Hurts, and I don't know where your feeling was on why so tentative in the run game last year. You know what I mean? Like, it just didn't seem like the same guy from the year before.
Yeah, I don't know, because it seemed like from the start. We know he had the injury, was it the knee injury that was at some point during the season, and that impacted him. But I felt from the start.
Don't you find it weird, though, that we never heard anything about that after the season?
I always find the Eagles and their injury situation to be weird, yes, and their lack of information. But, they're pretty open about why they're not as forthcoming with the information. So, yeah, I found it strange, and we'll see. Him being healthy is obviously the number one priority for him to be able to have a good year.
No doubt about it. Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, taking a look, staying on the offensive side of the ball. Right guard is going to be interesting. Tyler Steen had the ankle injury over the weekend. He goes out, and in today goes Mekhi Becton. You were early on that report that they wanted to look at him at guard. He's been playing a little left guard here and there. Well, today he got his first look at right guard. Do we see Mekhi Becton being a major factor now in that right guard battle?
I mean, it's amazing how many opportunities they've had already to look at him playing left guard and right guard because of the OTAs with Landon Dickerson not being there a few times. And then at the start, Landon Dickerson had to overcome a toe, and then he comes back, and then bam, Tyler Steen's hurt. And so he's in there at right guard now. And the interesting thing is today, Mike, Lane Johnson was sidelined with a toe injury that's considered minor, and you could have played Mekhi Becton at right tackle and then put like Darian Kennard at right guard or Matt Hennessy or something like that. But no, they wanted to continue to look at Mekhi Becton at right guard, so they put Fred Johnson at right tackle and continue to give Becton a look. You know, as I was told throughout the first few days, he was doing okay. Nothing great, nothing terrible. Obviously, this is a new situation for him. I get the feeling that this is someone that Stoutland is really pounding the table for, because again, you just don't see a whole lot of 6'8", 350 or whatever pound guards like that. He was a tackle his entire life, but this is what training camp's for. This is the experimentation, and if it works, Jeff Stoutland is once again going to look like a genius.
Well, if Jeff Stoutland's pounding the table for him, I would imagine that he's going to get his way. And so, I mean, I said earlier, I don't know if you agree or not, but I have a hard time thinking this guy gives this job up unless he just stinks. Yeah, I mean, and the strange thing is I don't think that they're down on Tyler Steen. Now, him being hurt, certainly not good. And Nick Sirianni said today, you know, he's going to miss a little bit of time. The pads come out tomorrow. There's still plenty of time for Tyler Steen to prove himself, and I still think the Eagles would want Tyler Steen to win the job because that's what they drafted him for. He's been working at it for a year now. He's already started a game. But yeah, the more he's hurt, the more opportunities Becton's going to get. And because of Becton's pedigree and because of his size, and if he has Stoutland in his corner, the more opportunities he gets, right. That's not going to be great for Steen, especially if Becton can looks like he can play the position. Jeff, I think one of the biggest stories that is, not talked about a whole heck of a lot is the retirement of Kelce and the replacement, Cam Jurgens. What are we hearing about Jurgens in that role and how different that look is with Kelce out and Jurgens in? I tell you, it's another position where you analyze it differently once the pads come out, and then also once the defense starts to get a little bit more intricate, when Vic Fangio himself gets less into the experimental mode of trying to mix personnel and find out who's there, and then more into the schematic role as camp goes on. But in petty, how guys move. And Cam Jurgens, he was drafted because he was such a great athlete, a guy who played tight end and moved to center. And they thought he had, and I would love to stop doing this myself, right? Just bringing up the whole Jason Kelce comparisons. But they thought he had a similar type of athleticism, if not better, the athlete than Jason Kelce. So what we've seen through camp, what I've been told, is that he's moved really well and has really taken to the movement required at that position. You're talking about kicking out into the second level or blocking out on the wide zones and the inside zones, your reach blocks, your cover ups and everything like that. And that's his strength and forte, the ability to get out there quickly and get in front of guys to create space. And so that's been demonstrated so far. And when the pads come on, Mike, and we get deeper, then we'll figure out how's he doing, sorting blitzes. How are the right guys when they're showing one thing but giving you another on defense? Yeah, Jurgens, and it'll be interesting because you got Jurgens playing center, which is new, and now he's got a different right guard next to him almost every single day. How impactful is that? Yeah, well, I would think that's pretty impactful. At the end of the day, a center's got to do a center's job, and the right guard's got to do the right guard's job, and the communication should be there. They're standing next to each other. But you're right. It's a far cry from years ago if you had Kelce and Sayamalu next to each other, where they probably didn't, the communication was probably there they probably just looked at each other and knew what they were thinking. All right, let's go on defense. A lot more stories on the defensive side of the ball than on offense, and one of the big ones is James Bradberry. And, Bradberry came out this weekend and I thought was, pretty open. He said, look, I stunk last year, essentially, and I asked him, I'll go play safety. kind of reading the writing on the wall there. What are we hearing about his transition to safety over the first couple of days here? Do we really think he's a factor in that safety position battle?
Yeah, I'm definitely in the camp skeptical on James Bradberry at safety. I mean, I admire his decision to go to the coaching staff and say, let's try this. I admire the coach. I think the coaching staff is making a smart decision as far as saying, sure, let's give it a whirl and see what you got there. Vic Fangio did say he was still going to practice at corner along here in camp at some point as well. Had a nice pass breakup today, but Mike, I always like to boil things down to the reality of a situation. And it's not just where you are and where you're playing. It's who you are, your age, your contract situation, and what's at your position ahead of you, right? So I got to think season opener, your starting safeties are going to be C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Reed Blankenship. And I'm believe that at some point in training camp, Sidney Brown will at least come off PUP and start practicing. He may not be 100% by the opener, but he is going to be at some point this season in that safety mix, and they drafted him in the third round. So is James Bradberry at $13 million a year going to be the fourth safety on the team? I have a hard time seeing that. To me, it's worth it if he's starting, if he's able to beat out Reed Blankenship and Sidney Brown, but again, then that goes back to why do you want him starting safety? He's, well north of 30s, not fast or dynamic anymore. You have Sidney Brown, you have Reed Blankenship that you gave a 1-year extension to and paid him a little bit of money. So I don't see how it really fits. I think it sounds nice conceptually, but unless those two guys, Blankenship gets hurt or CJ Gard, unless there's injuries that you say, well, James Bradberry can start safety for us, then I really don't, and that's not a great situation, but then I don't see any pathway to him being the fourth safety. It doesn't financially make sense, and it age everything. That's a special team spot, fourth safety.
No, and ironically today, him and Avonte Maddox were paired up together at the safety spot. You're thinking, man, can you see a scenario where those two guys are on the field playing safety together?
I can, but it's just not a good scenario. A lot of guys on IR.
Right, exactly. Good point. Geoff Mosher, let's look at the secondary. And what are we hearing? How's that? Everybody was interested and intrigued by the amount of volume of talent there. Is it starting to shake out a little bit through the first week?
Yeah, I mean, it's only starting to shake out as far as rotations and guys, getting in there. Keely Ringo has worked opposite Slay. Isaiah Rodgers has worked opposite Slay. More Ringo lately. Quinyon Mitchell, like most rookies, even first-rounders, they get worked in slowly. They got to prove they can handle what you give them at the start before you start moving them into more prominent roles. But, again, pads will come out, and I think that will help separate the guys who are going to be fighting for backup jobs and the guys who are going to be fighting for starting jobs. And, don't forget about Eli Ricks. Got a lot of experience last year. He's a physical guy. Wouldn't put him on my top 3 to compete for that job. But again, when the pads come out, things change.
Yeah, and, we're all kind of keeping our eye on the safety spot and what kind of combinations. We know one guy is going to be Slay. It's just, is it Rodgers? Is it Ringo? Is it Mitchell? What happens with Cooper DeJean and how that injury kind of factored in to all this? So secondary, we would imagine, Geoff, that, I don't know, the actual 3 games might have a role in who makes the team at that spot.
As far as the roster spots, yeah.
I mean, I don't know that you're going to see Quinyon Mitchell play all 3 and Darius Slay play all 3, but I don't know. Rodgers, Ricks, Ringo, all those guys. Do they want to, and there's other guys, Josh Jobe, and, there's just so many guys there. How do you make the decision of which ones stay and which ones go?
Yeah, no, I think it's a tough one. So I agree with you. It wouldn't surprise me if almost all your corners outside of Darius Slay played in the preseason games, including Quinyon Mitchell.
Linebacker, Devin White, Nakobe Dean. When you look at the linebacker, what's the intel there on how that thing is starting to shape up?
Well, first thing about Nakobe, Mike, is, and I don't know if you've seen any footage yourself or pictures or anything, the guy is a lot bigger. I mean, he definitely put some good muscle on this offseason. Lower body, upper body, and that's good because he's one of those guys like Nolan Smith also that needed to get stronger, needs to hold up because he didn't hold up last year. But, the other thing that you hear, and I wrote about this over the weekend on InsideTheBirds.com, is that N'Kobe's showing up as a blitzer. All right, Devin White, we know he's a very good blitzer. We're seeing him and Zach Bond and all three, Ben Van Sumeren also, at times blitzing so far. What does that tell you? Are the Eagles going to start blitzing like crazy? No. I wrote a column about it. Vic Fangio is a big proponent of what you call sim pressures, where you bring a linebacker as a blitzer a little bit late right after the snap, and then you drop one of your overhang defenders, maybe sometimes a down lineman, but usually an overhang defender. So you're really just sending four, and it looks like a blitz because the linebacker's coming at the quarterback, but you've got an overhang guy dropping. So it's still just a four-man rush. It's been a big part, and nobody did this better last year than the Baltimore Ravens with Mike McDonald. He was one of the he was a big sim pressure guy, big disguise and deception guy. And Vic Fangio has been doing that for decades and even more so last few years. So I believe this I believe this is a nice compromise, right? Because fans are always calling for blitzing. The Eagles finally have some linebackers, inside linebackers, who have a nose for getting to the quarterback. And so you're going to see that, but they're not going to be a lot of 5- and 6-man rushes. At the end of the day, they're going to be 4-man rushes. And then we'll just have people groaning about overhang players dropping into coverage instead.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, the flip side of that will be, why is so-and-so dropping in to 100%. Coverage there? Yes. Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast. They've got plenty of intel on these first couple of practices, and we're going to have the pads. You just mentioned probably 3 or 4 times how some of these battles get impacted by the pads coming out. Well, that starts tomorrow at the NovaCare Complex, and we'll see which battles start to emerge there. But I guess the key ones right now, the right guard spot, due to injury, what happens there? Secondary, we know a whole heck of a lot. One we didn't hit on the offensive side of the ball is the wide receivers. We know 2. What about 3 and 4 and maybe 5?
Yeah, I mean, Mike, they're really looking for a slot receiver here. Paris Campbell is a guy. He's had a nice camp, but it's dangerous for Paris Campbell to be a slot receiver. Do remember that if you're going to be in a lot of 11 personnel, which is 3 wide receivers, 1 back, 1 tight end, that your inside slot receiver, and you're going to run out of those formations, your inside slot receiver's got to be able to block a little bit. And Paris Campbell has barely been healthy throughout most of his career as an outside receiver. So now you're going to put him in the slot. He's not the biggest guy. He's 6'1", 200. I mean, that's not tiny, but they drafted Anais Smith, who is a natural slot. He's been having some trouble catching the ball. So Johnny Wilson has become an interesting name. He was one of their day 3 picks, 6'7" guy. Some people thought around the league, from Florida State, by the way, that he would be a tight end, sort of a detached tight end in the NFL because he's 6'7". The Eagles have never called him a tight end, called him a wide receiver. They've worked him out inside out and outside, but mainly through camp so far as an inside guy. Nice big body, but what you're giving there in blocking and big body, you're taking away in maybe separation ability and vertical stress ability because he's 6'7". Those guys don't exactly separating at the top of the route when you're 6'7" is a little different than when you're, say, Nelson Aguilar or Jason Avant, right? And you're more normal wide receiver size.
All right, Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. We are just getting started at training camp, but stuff is starting to emerge. And don't forget, you can listen to the Eagles and the Ravens next Friday night here on 97.3 ESPN. Game number 1 of 3 preseason matchups. And, of course, the 2024 season begins in Brazil on September the 6th. We'll have that game for you here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Geoff Mosher, we'll talk to you on Wednesday, man.
All right, Mike, take care.
All right, Geoff Mosher, everybody, from the Inside the Birds podcast. And don't forget, check that out on all podcasting platforms and their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. All right, Mike Gill, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.